You ever notice how quiet guilt sounds? It doesn't scream. It doesn't cry. It hides behind perfectly timed Instagram stories, vacation reels, and I'm doing amazing posts. But behind that curated peace is chaos. Behind that smirk is a storm they won't admit is destroying them. Because here's the truth. Your avoidant ex is not fine. They're performing. And while they smile for the world, they're silently unraveling in the background. Let's cut the crap for a second. They didn't heal. They didn't glow up. They didn't move on the way they want you to think. They escaped. They ran from the discomfort of connection, and now they're choking on the silence they once craved. Waste no more time arguing what a good man should be. Be one. Marcus Aurelius. You became what they feared. Emotionally grounded, self-aware, detached from their chaos. And that's the real reason they're spiraling now. Because they can't control the version of you that no longer chases. They thought pulling away gave them power. They thought acting indifferent would keep you hooked. But silence flipped the script. Because when you didn't react, it exposed them. When you didn't chase, it forced them to face the one thing they avoid at all costs, themselves. And right now, they're losing that battle. Their anxiety is louder at night. Their distractions aren't working. Their freedom feels more like isolation, dressed in independence. And they'll never say it out loud. But every part of their being aches to know if you still care. If you still think about them. If you're hurting too, here's the brutal part. You're not. At least not like before. Because now you see through the illusion. Now you realize this wasn't a mutual breakup. It was an emotional bailout. The soul becomes dyed with the color of its thoughts. Marcus Aurelius. And your thoughts? They're no longer wrapped around fixing someone who kept breaking you. You've leveled up, and the higher you rise, the more their mask slips. So don't fall for the calm. Don't fall for the they're doing fine storyline. Because beneath that surface is panic, and behind those eyes is a question they'll never ask you directly. How are they doing this without me? So stay with me. Because in this video, I'm going to show you the undeniable signs that your avoidant ex is quietly breaking down while pretending they're thriving. And by the end, you'll understand the one thing that destroys them more than losing you. Watching you evolve in silence. But before we go deeper, hit that like button if you're done romanticizing people who couldn't handle your love. Subscribe if you're ready to master your mind, not your ex. Share this with someone who needs a reminder that pulling away isn't strength. It's a cover-up. Join our channel membership to support more raw, real content like this. And I want you to comment this one mantra. Silence reveals what performance hides. Type it to remind yourself. You're not crazy. You're not overthinking. You're just finally seeing the truth they tried so hard to bury. Let's expose what's really going on behind that avoidant facade. Let's begin. Stay focused. The calm is a cover-up, not closure. They look calm. They look unbothered. They seem like they've moved on without a single crack in their emotional armor. But let's get something straight. What you're seeing is not peace. It's performance. Because avoidant types are masters at keeping up appearances. They have to be. Their entire identity is built on not needing anyone, not feeling too much, not letting anyone close enough to see the chaos inside. But here's the twist. They never actually heal. They just suppress. They don't reflect. They distract. They don't process. They project. They don't sit in pain. They sprint away from it, masking their wounds behind a routine of detachment, fake confidence, and rehearsed indifference. It is not death that a man should fear, but he should fear never beginning to live. Marcus Aurelius. You gave them something real, connection, depth, stability. And for someone wired to fear emotional intimacy, that felt suffocating, even if it was healthy. So they did what avoidants do best. They sabotaged it to regain control. But here's the tragic irony. They left to protect themselves from vulnerability, only to realize they've now got no one to lean on, no one who truly sees them. And that freedom they wanted. Now it's just solitude wrapped in anxiety. They'll post their highlights. They'll smile in group photos. They'll even date someone new. But every second of that is calculated to look fine, because they know the one person who truly knew their patterns is watching you. And what destroys them slowly is the realization that you're not chasing. You're not reaching out. You're not playing the game anymore. You're not seeking closure, because deep down you already saw the truth. Their calm is a cover-up, not closure, not healing, not growth. And the longer they pretend, the more unbearable it becomes. Because faking fine gets exhausting when the person you thought would always wait finally stopped waiting. Stay tuned, because in the next point we're going deeper into how their need for control starts turning into panic the moment you go silent. Key point 2. Silence isn't just silence. It's power, and it terrifies them. You think your silence goes unnoticed. It's the loudest thing in their world right now. Avoidants don't fear breakups. They fear accountability. They don't fear losing you. They fear losing control over how you remember them. And when you go quiet, completely quiet, it strips away their last line of defense, your emotional reactions. Let me say this directly. Your silence is doing more damage than any text, any argument, any desperate closure talk ever could. The best revenge is not to be like your enemy. Marcus Aurelius. You didn't beg. You didn't chase. You didn't explain for the 100th time why you deserved to be loved properly. You just disappeared from their reach. And now? They're checking your social media more than they'll ever admit. They're rereading old messages. They're wondering, have they really moved on? Not because they want you back, at least not consciously, but because they want to know they still matter. Avoidants crave emotional distance because it keeps them safe. But when you create that distance on your own terms, it flips the dynamic. Now you're the one who's unavailable. You're the one who's hard to read, and you are the one reclaiming the power they assumed you'd never take back. See, they thought they could slip away and you'd be waiting with open arms. They never imagined you'd stop fighting. They never imagined you'd become silent and sovereign, a version of yourself that doesn't orbit around their moods. And that silence, it's messing with their head. Because for the first time, they have to sit with their decisions. Not run, not blame, just feel. He who angers you conquers you. Elizabeth Kenny. But now, you're unshaken. You're in control. And nothing wrecks an avoidance ego faster than realizing they didn't break you. So, don't mistake your silence for weakness. It's a mirror. And it's showing them exactly who they've been and who they lost. Coming up next, we'll dive into how their moving on phase is actually a trauma response in disguise, and how pretending they're fine turns into a full-on identity crisis. Key point 3. Their moving on phase is a lie. They're trying to believe. Let's kill the fantasy once and for all. Your avoidant ex didn't move on. They ran away and slapped a healed label on their emotional escape route. That rebound you saw them with? That fresh start they bragged about? That new routine, new friends, new adventures? None of it is real. It's emotional camouflage, desperately sewn together to convince themselves they're okay. Because if they stop to feel, even for a second, it'll all come crashing down. You can't escape your own mind, so either learn to master it or be ruled by it. Epictetus avoidants don't move on like everyone else. They don't reflect. They distract. They don't process loss. They replace it. And that rebound, it's not about connection. It's about control. Control over the narrative. Control over their image. Control over the lingering ache that whispers, "You pushed away the only person who ever tried to love you deeply." They're not with someone new because they're over you. They're with someone new because they're terrified to sit with the void your absence created. Think about it. If they were really over you, they wouldn't need to prove it. They wouldn't need to post. They wouldn't need to overperform. But the more they try to show off their healing, the more obvious it becomes. They're faking peace, and it's not working. Behind the smiles is a soul still haunted by what they let go of. Behind the dates is a heart that never closed the last chapter. Just skip to a new one, hoping you wouldn't notice the pages still bleeding. And here's the part that cuts deep. They thought the new person would make them forget you. But instead you became the quiet comparison, the standard, the regret. Because no matter how hard they try to recreate your energy, it can't be cloned. And they feel it more with each empty interaction. So if you're sitting there thinking, "They're fine without me," understand this. They're pretending for the world, but collapsing behind closed doors. Next, we're going into the identity collapse avoidants go through when their emotional defenses no longer work, and how your growth becomes the trigger they never saw coming. Key point 4. When their mask cracks, their identity crumbles. Here's what no one tells you about avoidant exes. Their entire sense of identity is built on control, detachment, and emotional self-preservation. But the second they lose control over how you view them, that identity starts to collapse. Because when you stop chasing, when you stop explaining yourself, when you stop trying to fix things, they're forced to confront the version of themselves they've spent years avoiding. And that confrontation? It's brutal. He who conquers himself is the mightiest warrior. Confucius avoidants aren't emotionally numb. They're emotionally overwhelmed. They learned long ago to survive by suppressing and shutting down, not because they don't feel, but because feeling felt unsafe. So when they walked away, it wasn't peace they found. It was temporary relief from a connection that felt too raw, too vulnerable, too exposed. But here's the twist. Now that you're silent, now that you're not soothing their guilt or validating their fear, they're left alone with the parts of themselves they always outsourced to you. And those cracks are beginning to show. They're more irritable, more impulsive. They're overthinking what you're doing, who you're with, what version of you they can't see anymore. Because if you're healing, if you're rising, then they have to face the ugly truth. They left a version of you that no longer exists, and they might never get access to the evolved version you've become. That terrifies them, because the power they once had, the emotional grip they thought would last forever, is gone. And in its place is something they don't recognize: your indifference. Avoidants may fear intimacy, but they fear being forgotten even more. And right now, your silence is starting to feel like erasure. Not just of the relationship, but of their relevance. A man's worth is no greater than his ambitions. Marcus Aurelius. And your ambition now. Peace, discipline, evolution. That's what's breaking them. Not because you're punishing them, but because you're proving you never needed to beg in the first place. And here's the secret mantra I want you to comment right now if you're resonating with this. I don't chase closure, I become it. Because that's what you're doing. You're becoming the version of yourself they never thought you'd be strong enough to become without them. Next, we're unpacking how your glow-up in silence forces them to reflect in ways they've never done before, and how regret becomes a slow, silent punishment they can't escape. Key point 5. Your glow-up isn't just inspiring, it's a silent punishment. They thought they could leave you where they last saw you. Heartbroken, confused, still hoping for a message that would never come. But instead, you evolved in silence. And that silence, it turned into progress, into peace, into power. Nothing crushes an avoidant more than watching someone they abandoned rise without them. Why? Because deep down they believed they were the reason you were whole. That without their presence, their attention, their validation, you'd fall apart. But you didn't. Success is the best revenge. Frank Sinatra. You glowed up mentally, emotionally, spiritually. You reclaimed your time, your energy, your dignity. And that glow-up became the very thing that shatters the fragile fantasy they created about you. Because now they can't play the victim. They can't pretend you were the unstable one. They can't rationalize walking away by convincing themselves you weren't ready or mature. Everything they projected onto you, you outgrew it. And every time they peek at your life now on social media, through mutual friends, through late-night stalking, they see the one thing that destroys them from within. You no longer need their absence to feel whole. That new energy you carry, the peace, the confidence, the discipline, it's not for revenge. It's not to win them back. It's not to make them jealous. It's who you were meant to become all along. And that's what they can't handle. Because while you were healing, they were hiding. While you were building, they were burying. While you were accepting the loss and growing through it, they were avoiding the mirror, still clinging to a version of themselves that no longer makes sense. Don't explain your philosophy. Embody it. Epictetus. And that's exactly what you're doing. You're not just healed. You're embodying everything they feared you'd discover without them. And that is their karma. Stay with me, because next we're diving into the subtle signs your avoidant ex is quietly watching your life from the shadows, and why they'll never admit it out loud. To key point 6, they're quietly watching you, but will never admit it. You may think they've moved on. You may believe they've forgotten you. But the truth is far more twisted than that. Your avoidant ex is watching you closely, not because they miss you in a healthy way, but because they can't look away. They're checking your stories at 2 a.m. They're scanning your photos for clues. They're stalking your progress, not to celebrate it, but to measure the damage of their own decision. We suffer more often in imagination than in reality. Seneca. See, avoidance will never double tap. They won't comment. They won't text, "I miss you," because vulnerability to them feels like death. But lurking is safe. Watching you glow in silence is their way of staying close without risking rejection. They're addicted to your growth, even if they pretend to hate it. Every time you post something confident, something calm, something evolved, it triggers them. Because in your peace they see their chaos. In your independence they feel their own instability. And in your silence they feel the truth. They lost access to the version of you they could have grown with. But now, you've grown past them. You're not the same person who would have dropped everything for a "hey" text. You're not waiting for breadcrumbs. You're building the whole damn table. What you do speaks so loudly that I cannot hear what you say. Ralph Waldo Emerson. They may not say a word, but their actions are louder than ever. Random views, anonymous story likes, weird timing with mutual friends, sudden accidental run-ins. And you know what's worse? They're not just watching you. They're comparing everyone in their life to you. The way you listened, the way you made them feel seen, the way you challenged them to be better. No one matches it. And they know it. But pride will keep their lips sealed, because to reach out would mean confessing what they swore they'd never feel. Regret. So don't be fooled by the silence. Silence isn't absence. Silence is surveillance. And you're the main event. Coming next, we'll expose how their attempt to replace you only deepens their emotional damage, and why no substitute ever feels like enough. Key point 7. They tried to replace you, but only replaced themselves with emptiness. Let's make something clear. You were not a placeholder. You were not some phase they had to grow out of. You were a mirror, and avoidants hate mirrors because they reflect what's unhealed, not what's easy. So, what do they do after losing someone like you? They try to replicate the connection without doing the inner work. They swipe. They flirt. They latch onto someone new thinking maybe this one won't require depth. Maybe this one won't notice the emotional walls. Maybe this time I'll feel in control. But here's what happens. They don't replace you. They replace the experience of being seen with the illusion of being safe. You must become who you are. Do not try to become someone else's idea of you. Nietzsche. The rebound isn't about love. It's about escaping. Escaping responsibility. Escaping reflection. Escaping the shame of knowing they left someone who actually showed up. And at first, the distraction works. The new person doesn't ask deep questions. The conversations stay surface level. The intimacy is physical, not emotional. But then the void creeps back in. Because you can't outrun connection. You can't unfeel the way someone once made you feel alive. And when the dust settles, they're left with someone who doesn't challenge them. Someone who doesn't see them. Someone who feels nothing like you. And now they're trapped. They can't go back without swallowing their ego. They can't move forward without confronting the hole they created. So they settle. They settle for safe, for easy, for numb. But deep down, they know they replaced gold with glitter. And that realization, it haunts them. We are more often frightened than hurt, and we suffer more from imagination than from reality. Seneca, because in the silence of that new relationship, they can hear your absence louder than ever. And no matter how many times they smile for the camera, no matter how many arms they lie next to, they know what they lost. Next up, we're going to explore how your transformation becomes the very proof they tried to deny, and why that transformation turns into the heaviest burden they'll carry in silence. When their fantasy collides with your reality, let them smile for the world. Let them post their highlight reel. Let them pretend they've evolved. But you know the truth. You've seen behind the mask. You've felt the silence that says more than any "I'm fine" ever could. They thought they were in control. They thought you'd be frozen in time, waiting, doubting, chasing. But now, they're watching you become untouchable. And nothing cuts deeper than seeing the person they once took for granted outgrow their entire imagination of you. You have power over your mind, not outside events. Realize this, and you will find strength. Marcus Aurelius. Your glow-up isn't revenge. It's revelation. It's the truth they've been running from finally catching up to them, and the part that destroys them the most. You're not doing it to prove anything. You're just done performing, done shrinking, done trying to fix what wasn't yours to fix. So, here's what I want you to do right now. Subscribe if you're on your own healing path and ready to turn silence into strength. Like this video if you've ever been made to feel like you were too much for someone who couldn't even face themselves. Share it with someone who's been silently suffering, thinking they were the only one. Join the channel membership to help us keep creating deep, psychological, high-value content just like this. And drop this mantra in the comments: I didn't move on to win, I moved on to begin. Because your healing isn't a competition, it's a declaration. Coming next, your avoidant ex thought you'd never move on, until they saw this. They assumed they had time. They thought the silence meant they still lived in your heart. But one moment, one shift, will shatter their illusion and flip the entire script. In the next video, we'll break down the exact moment they realize you're not coming back, and why that realization hits them harder than any breakup ever could. Don't miss it. Hit that bell so you're the first to know when it drops. Because the comeback? It's not loud. It's legendary.